You know, something really interesting happened on Tuesday. Early in the morning, a popular story was going around social media from Huffington Post saying, why have Democrats stopped caring about Donald Trump's tax returns? And just as that story was kind of going viral, another story came out and said that Democrats have filed a lawsuit against the Treasury Department and the IRS to force them to turn over Donald Trump's tax returns. So the first story, I guess, was a little bit premature because it turns out Democrats hadn't forgotten about Trump's tax returns. This is a legal battle and a subpoena battle that they have been fighting for several months. And yes, it did appear that they had forgotten about it or stopped caring about it, but they surprised us all. It said, oh, no, we were still working on this, and now we're suing to get our hands on these documents that we are legally, according to the Constitution, entitled to receive. Actually, I don't know if it's constitutional, but it is a written law here in the United States. I believe 1924, the law was written, that said that the House of Representatives does have the authority to get their hands on pretty much any citizen's tax return for any reason they so choose. So yeah, the law is on their side, but Steve Mnuchin with the Treasury Department, along with the head of the IRS, have repeatedly said, we're not going to comply with your subpoenas. We're not going to turn over Donald Trump's tax returns because you're going on some kind of partisan witch hunt, and we'll see you in court if that's the way you choose to handle this. And Democrats said, all right, saddle up, let's go. And that's what's happening right now. So here's the thing. Republicans don't really have a leg to stand on this particular issue. The law is very clear. They have the authority to do this. The House Ways and Means Committee can do this. And that's why they're suing to get their hands on these documents. They don't even have to have a reason. They have the authority to request the tax returns of any United States citizen. Donald Trump is a United States citizen. They can get his tax returns. End of story. But here's the other part of it. This administration is going to fight tooth and nail to prevent that from ever happening because Donald Trump has something to hide. And that's, I think, exactly what Democrats want to find out. What are you hiding? Is it something innocuous, like maybe you're not worth as much money as you say you are and it's just going to embarrass you a little bit? Or is it something more sinister? Is there evidence of financial fraud, evidence of bank fraud that we can, put up against what you've told banks in order to get money out of them? Is there potential money laundering? Are you profiting too much off the presidency or profiting at all? Are there massive conflicts of interest? What is hiding in those tax returns? The American public has a right to know. And that's what this all boils down to. Maybe the Democrats are engaged in some kind of partisan attack on the president to embarrass him. Well, to that I say good. Because this guy broke with decades of tradition of releasing his tax returns, still refuses to do it, has offered us numerous different lies to defend his not releasing the tax returns. And it's time that the American public learns the truth. What is he hiding? Because you're kidding yourself if you think there is nothing that this man is trying to keep secret from the American public. If he had nothing to hide, this information would have been made public years ago. It wasn't. He has repeatedly refused to do it. His staffers, his appointees have refused to comply with congressional subpoenas, and there is a reason for that. And at this point, the reason can only be that Donald Trump has something very serious that he doesn't want the rest of us to know about. Thanks for watching, everybody. And don't forget, if you like what you see here, like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. And now you can also become a member of Ring of Fire and get exclusive early access to certain Ring of Fire videos all throughout the week. Just click on the little join button right below the video.
In the city of Seattle, Washington, there exists a vending machine that over the years has become something of a local landmark amongst residents who are familiar with its mysterious history. Situated on the corner of John Street and 10th Avenue East in the bustling Capitol Hill neighborhood, the seemingly ancient machine is well known for dispensing random, sometimes rare cans of soda, a fact that's made all the more intriguing when you consider that nobody seems to know who stocks the machine or where it indeed came from. Covered in Coca-Cola livery and a smattering of graffiti, the machine's most notable feature, other than its age, is the fact that there's no option to order a specific drink from it. Instead, after putting the requisite amount of change into the machine, you are given the option of pressing one of 6 buttons, each of which sports an apparently custom-made and heavily faded label that simply reads, "Mystery." Pressing one of these buttons will then cause the machine to spit out a random can of cola. Exactly how many different kinds of soda are stored inside of the machine at any one time isn't known, and there are reports of people dropping tens of dollars into it at once in an attempt to discern what, if any, pattern there is to the kind of soda being dispensed. The result is invariably that the person walks away with dozens of cans of weird-tasting soda, but no answer. What makes the whole thing weirder is that a small percentage of the sodas that the machine dispenses are incredibly rare, if not otherwise impossible to acquire via conventional means due to them being discontinued or only being available for sale outside of the United States. For example, people using the machine are known to have walked away with cans of soda that haven't existed or been popular since the 1980s. This includes things like Lemon Lime Slice and Pepsi AM, or obscure drinks like Diet Hubba Bubba Bubblegum Soda and even bacon-infused Coca-Cola. It doesn't sound good at all. There are even rumors that people have gotten cans of Crystal Pepsi from the machine. As if all of this wasn't unusual enough, the machine has also been known to sometimes spit out otherwise normal brands of soda, but the cans sport vintage livery that hasn't been used in decades. To date, the only real common thread between the cans dispensed by the machine anyone has ever noticed is that it only ever seems to contain brand name soda produced by either Coca-Cola or by Pepsi. Curiously, despite being targeted by countless vandals and irate customers over the years, the machine has a propensity to eat bills particularly, but also sometimes change. Seattle residents familiar with it note it's rarely out of service and report that anytime the machine is damaged, it is generally fixed within a few days. It's similarly reported that after the machine was broken into one time, it was restocked and working within a week. It was then modified so that it was anchored to a nearby wall with a heavy padlock attached in order to protect the sweet, syrupy nectar that's housed within it. That said, when the staff here at Tadare found out when to go and check out the machine in June of 2018, while many people were still attempting to use the machine, including ourselves, it wouldn't dispense any soda, though it did happily collect all of our money. We could also hear the compressor working to keep the drinks inside cold, so it wasn't completely broken. It would seem whoever stocks the machine finally got wise to the problem as the machine suddenly disappeared in late June. The owners of the machine did leave behind a taped note in its place stating that the machine went for a walk. On the machine's Facebook page, a message was posted stating, "Going for a walk, need to find myself, maybe take a shower even." And indeed it did, with the graffiti largely removed and the machine somewhat prettied up before being put back. Fascinatingly, despite all of this and the fact that the machine is evidently being restocked on a fairly consistent basis given how frequently it is typically used because of its tourist attraction status, it's unclear who actually owns and operates this machine. A common hypothesis is that the machine is owned and operated by the owners of Broadway Locksmith, which the machine is housed immediately outside of. Supporting this idea is the fact that the machine draws power from Broadway Locksmith and that the heavy padlock keeping it secure was seemingly bought from that store. However, if Broadway Locksmith is responsible for stocking the machine, they have made a commendable effort to convince people otherwise. In addition to flatly denying that they have anything to do with it, both the owner of Broadway Locksmith and random employees have stuck to the exact same story over the years while being grilled by everyone from USA Today to Vice. They claim that they don't know who restocks the machine and that they've never seen anyone open it to put something inside it or collect the money that it contains. They do, however, claim that the machine has been there for a couple of decades, which is more or less corroborated by local residents, give or take a few years, depending on who you talk to. Alright, so at this point in the story, you might have found yourself thinking, well, yeah, I mean, but surely the city knows who owns and operates this machine because whoever owns it must have some sort of permit, right? Well, Jessica Lee of the Seattle Times had that exact same thought, and she reached out to city officials about the matter in an attempt to discern once and for all who actually owned and operated the machine. According to Lee, a spokeswoman for the city eventually got back to her and explained that for some reason the city didn't have any records pertaining to the machine in question. Unsurprisingly, given the near total lack of concrete information we actually know about the machine, Seattle residents have naturally come to the conclusion that the machine might actually be haunted. No doubt the machine will soon have its own show on the History Channel, with time-traveling aliens being the most likely maintainers of the device. But for now, despite all the hoopla about it and the surprisingly popular tourist attraction that it has become, there exists a more mundane explanation. While most locals living nearby likewise report never seeing anyone stocking the machine, a few have come out and stated that they've seen an unmarked white van pull up in the middle of the night with the driver stocking it. Twitter user Sarah Hamilton, at SAE of Doom, even once managed to snap a picture of a man and a woman stocking the machine in broad daylight. Sadly, E.T. was nowhere in sight at the time. But even with that picture, nobody has yet identified the couple shown in it. And that seems to be the way that everyone wants it. If someone were to actually resolve the mystery, which presumably would be pretty easy with a hidden camera and some moderately good research skills, it would kind of ruin the fun of the thing once and for all, and the famous attraction would cease to be anything more than an old vending machine that occasionally eats your money and spits out random flavors that were probably discontinued or aren't super popular for a reason. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, all of that good stuff. We make new videos every
Hello,
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Jay Ugrand experiment with you guys. Big show ahead as usual. Trump madness. I know I keep saying the 25th Amendment. Guys, he's crazy. He's totally lost his mind. So that's a story a little bit later in the program.
Jake now uses that hashtag in his emails to us.
Yeah.
When he's like pitching a story that we should do on the show.
I just do hashtag 25th Amendment. Okay. I'm going to start doing it about other people that aren't even president. Okay, there's a lot of candidates. All right, did they really have concrete in the milkshakes that they threw at conservative writer in Portland? We're going to break that down for you guys. Lots to get to. I'll tell you about Ocasio-Cortez. We're about to tell you about her right now. So let's do it. Let's get started.
Following AOC's visit to an El Paso migrant detention center, of course, there is right-wing spin, even though the heart of the story should be that migrants are being mistreated, abused, and kept in unsanitary conditions at these centers. Well, there's a right-wing writer for Washington Examiner. Now, let me be clear, Washington Examiner is a right-wing publication. Her name is Anna Giratelli, and she is saying that, according to her sources, AOC was yelling at Border Patrol agents while she was visiting the detention center. Here's her tweet. She says, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez screamed at federal law enforcement agents in a threatening manner during a visit to a US Border Patrol facility in El Paso Monday afternoon and refused to tour the facility, according to two people who witnessed it. Now, let me be clear in that she is not a source that should be trusted. In fact, she had, and this is something that Jordan Ewell brought up, she had claimed that there were prayer rugs at the border, that ranchers were finding Muslim prayer rugs at the border. And this was all meant to push this narrative that dangerous Muslims are trying to enter the United States at our southern border. That story was debunked. So again, she's not a source that should be trusted. But I also want to be clear about one other thing. Considering ProPublica's reporting, which indicates that 9,500 Border Patrol agents, both current and former, were in this private Facebook group putting out disgusting, sexually degrading content about AOC, I wouldn't really mind if she yelled at them, right?
Yeah.
Especially considering what she saw when she went to that detention center and what she witnessed with the abuse of these migrants.
So I have many things to say. First, to the Border Patrol agents who were such tough guys when they were doing their Facebook group. We'll give money to the agent who throws a burrito at these bitches, is what they wrote.
Oh, yeah.
Referring to AOC and another female congresswoman who also happened to be Latina. And they talked about hoes and they talked about all these things and how they were gonna do this and that. And now, if it's even remotely true, they go running to conservative media crying. Oh my God, AOC was mean to us, mommy, will you protect us? Are you crying? Are you crying?
It's incredible. I mean, they will sit there and laugh about, make jokes about migrants who have died under their watch. And then they turn around and they cry when someone allegedly yelled at them. Again, I don't know if she yelled at them or not, right? I don't trust the source.
No, I don't believe it at all.
Yeah.
It's actually now warped because all conservative rumors and conspiracy theories warp immediately. It started with speaking to them in a threatening manner. How she explained, it's like, I'm 5'4", threatening how, right? And you guys have guns. So what, threatening how? What does that even mean, right? And then it became yelling, and then it became yelling, screaming, and crying. There are no reports of her crying.
I know.
This is all made up. And look, the other story that this reporter made up is so preposterous.
Reporter.
I know, reporter, right? Is so preposterous that anyone who would believe that and put it out as a real news story, I mean, you just have to realize that they're, at a bare minimum, their judgment is horrific, let alone the fact that they're likely just making things up on purpose for their propaganda, which is what conservatives normally do. Prayer rugs at the border, really? From Juan Bin Ramirez? Okay, it's obviously to scaremonger people like, oh my God, they're all brown. And I can't tell the Mexicans from the Arabs. There's prayer rugs. You know what one of them turned out to be? They're like, we have evidence, we have, everybody's like, really, let's take a look. It's the only picture they ever showed. Turns out it was a soccer jersey.
Of course.
Of course!
No, but everybody knows that devout Muslims like to pray on soccer jerseys.
Oh yeah, that's a well-known fact.
I mean, it is the prayer rug of choice. No, but I want to also remind you guys of the story that ProPublica broke, because let's not get distracted by nonsense and false stories coming from the right. So again, this is from the ProPublica piece. Perhaps the most disturbing post, and this is again from that private Facebook page, perhaps the most disturbing posts target Ocasio-Cortez. One includes a photo illustration of her engaged in oral sex at a migrant detention center. Texts accompanying the image reads, "Lucky illegal immigrant glory hole special starring AOC."
So that's when AOC had not come into the building and they were tough guys. Then AOC comes to the building and they're like, oh, she was threatening us, she was threatening us. What happened, tough guys? When it's little kids and you lock them up in cages, you're really tough. When they die and you spit on them proverbially and say, hey, if he dies, he dies. That's a direct quote from one of these Facebook posts. You're a tough guy, right? When AOC's not in the building, you're talking about this, that, and other thing, and you're so tough. She comes in the building, you start shaking. And then you go run to conservative mommy and say, mommy, she threatened me. Oh, you're so tough. And that's the thing with all bullies. They're not actually tough at all. It's insecurity that breeds it. And so they want to go take it out on defenseless people because in reality, they're not tough at all.
Let me give you more. Another is a photo illustration of a smiling President Donald Trump forcing Ocasio-Cortez's head toward his crotch. The agent who posted the image commented, "That's right, bitches. The masses have spoken, and today democracy won." I will give them credit for acknowledging that Donald Trump likes to sexually assault and rape women.
Yeah, it's probably not. Well, like with a lot of conservatives, they celebrate that, and that's why they were celebrating that image. So, to use your vernacular, now that a congresswoman, by the way, the youngest female congresswoman ever in United States history, has come into the building and actually stood up for the defenseless, do you feel threatened, bitches? So you like to use those terms, right? Now they'll cry about this, I guarantee it. Oh, the good people of Border Patrol doing their jobs and crushing those people and making sure they never get any showers and making sure they're locked up in cages, and if they die, laughing at them. Are you impugning their motives? Goddamn right I am. And if she didn't yell at them, I wish she had.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, like the story is being reported by conservatives as if, even if it were true, it would be a bad thing. No, these are people who are abusing their power. Now we know that the right wing doesn't see this as a bug, but rather a feature. And so instead of focusing on the fact that now dozens of migrants have died under Border Patrol custody, and instead of focusing on how they're being kept in unsanitary conditions and they're just being abused every single day, they've decided we're gonna go after AOC because she allegedly yelled at Border Patrol agents. Please. Now let me give you AOC's response quickly. This is graphic 6. She says, to these CBP officers saying they felt threatened by me, they were literally discussing making a GoFundMe for an officer who attacked me on my tour. They confiscated my phone and they were all armed. I'm 5'4". They're just upset I exposed their inhumane behavior. That is a leader. That right there is a leader. And Nancy Pelosi should take note.
No, I believe she has taken note.
And let me give you a statement that she just recently gave to Yahoo News. Because Yahoo asked her, do you think we're really headed toward fascism? And here's her exact quote. Are we headed to fascism? Yes. I don't think there's a question. If you actually take the time to study and to look at the steps and to see how government transforms under authoritarian regimes and look at the political decisions and patterns of this president, the answer is yes.
Man, she doesn't scare easily. So if you're gonna come at her, you're gonna have to come a little stronger than that. And you can tell, again, they're just bullies. And the minute you push back, they cower, and they should. And what I was gonna say is that, look, 9,500 people were on that Facebook group. There's only 20,000 Border Patrol agents. So it doesn't mean that everybody in that group was Border Patrol, but obviously a lot of people there were Border Patrol or connected to Border Patrol. So that's a huge percentage. It's not a few bad apples. It is, I'm sure that there are a few good apples mixed in with quite a rotten lot. And most importantly, led by rotten leaders like Donald Trump, who encourage their worst side rather than their best side.
All right, let's move on to the next story. Texas Representative Joaquin Castro was part of the Hispanic caucus delegation that is visiting migrant detention centers throughout the country. And after visiting the El Paso, Texas detention center, it was noted that he actually smuggled his phone inside. Now remember, they're not allowing members of Congress to show up with any type of filming equipment, but he managed to get his phone inside and he took video of what he saw. Now, we're gonna toss to the video, but remember, they did try to clean things up before members of Congress showed up. And even with that in mind, here's what the scene looked like.
Huh? And you were out there? Yeah. You understand they moved it down?
Yes.
She doesn't have medicine.
Just checked her 1 second ago. She got a designated cop this morning over anti-seizure meds.
They said that they changed her medicine.
So the updated medicine, which I'm not going to break for patient confidentiality, but the updated medicine, I just looked at her medical record, was administered at 0800. So she's not due for another dose for another 10 hours.
There's a woman here. There's a woman here. The doctor told her she needs a biopsy for the lump on her back.
So, we obviously don't have the facilities to do a surgical biopsy here, but we'll make sure that we're continuing her care. It's on her record, and when she gets to her next stop, wherever that is, whether it's in our custody or out, those records go with her.
So you can see Ayanna Pressley in that video as well. She is joining along with the group of Congress people in order to see what's really going on in these detention centers. And if you couldn't hear the audio clearly in that video, there's a discussion going on about how some of these migrant women who are in that crowded space don't have access to the medication they need. And Castro shared more details in a Twitter thread saying, here's what we found at the El Paso Border Patrol Station #1. Women from Cuba, some grandmothers crammed into a prison-like cell with one toilet, but no running water to drink from or wash their hands with, concrete floors, cinder block walls, steel toilets. He also says many said they had not bathed for 15 days. Some had been separated from children. Some had been held for more than 50 days. Several complained that they had not received their medications, including one for epilepsy. Members of Congress comforted them when the women broke down.
So I just want to avoid confusion. Joaquin Castro is obviously a member of Congress. His brother Julian Castro is running for president, and Joaquin is actually also the campaign manager for his brother as he runs for president. So he's got two jobs there in a sense. And I think the most interesting part of this story is the fact that United States Congress people have to sneak in cameras to these facilities.
Exactly.
They are supposed to be our representatives. That is why it's called the House of Representatives. Now, those Border Patrol folks, I didn't hire them. And I get it that there's a process. We elect the officials, the officials then set up an executive branch, et cetera. But people that we elected should have a lot more authority, not less authority. And a lot of these detention facilities are private. So wait a minute, they're not even government officials. So private corporations in some instances are saying, no, I will tell the people's representatives what they are allowed and not allowed to do, and they'll like it. No, they won't like it, and I'm glad he secretly recorded it. I hope they all do. And the reason they don't want him recording it is because people have a different point of view when they read a story and another one when they see it with their own eyes. So if you had read that a guy washed up ashore trying to cross the border with his 23-month-old baby, you might be touched by that, you might be moved by that. You see the picture, it's a whole different story. And that is why when, for example, we were doing the Iraq war, the Bush administration was desperate to not have the media show any of the caskets coming home, let alone the bodies, let alone the dead, right? But not even the caskets, because then people might turn against the war. Because that's the reality. That was our boys coming home in caskets.
In fact, what was the one thing that our government was enraged with Chelsea Manning about? It was that video, right? Of the
Apache helicopter, that's right.
Exactly. So it's one thing to read a lengthy, dense article about what happened in that situation. It's a completely different thing to watch the video and to see how our military actually did a strike against reporters, or I'm sorry, first responders in that case.
Both.
Yeah.
So you see the reporters, and it's fairly clear that they're reporters. And if you read that, you might think, fog of war, you can't quite tell. But when the first responders come in after the first strike against the reporters, they are clearly first responders trying to help the wounded and the dead. And we hit them with a bomb and kill them. So when you see it with your own eyes, it's much worse. That's why the government's like, lock up Chelsea Manning, lock up Snowden, lock up Assange, lock up anyone who will actually bring you information. We got most of the media under control, they're on a leash. But these guys are out, we can't control them, so we're gonna imprison them. The rest of the media are cowards for not sticking up for those folks, okay? So now in this case, it's incumbent upon congressmen, because they won't let the media in. God forbid the American people should find out the horrors that our government is committing. I'm sure that the Germans back in the 1930s wouldn't have let you into their camps either. Wouldn't have let the media in there, and maybe people from other parties. And they would have said, oh, it is important for the security of the state. But it would have been imperative to get video out of there, wouldn't there? Now, back then, it would have been pictures. It would have been imperative. And look, I'm not above it. Even though I read 1,000 articles about this, when I saw the video, I was more affected. I mean, there they are. They look like your aunt. You know, maybe a lot of right-wingers don't think that. They're like, oh, they look different than me. I can't relate. To me, they look human. That looks like it could be my mom. It could be my aunt. And they're all lying there on concrete. There's no facilities. I mean, at a bare minimum, let alone the lump on the back, let alone the missing medication on the epilepsy, etc. Look at how we're treating them. Just putting them in this tiny little area and making them all lie on the concrete, treating them so inhumanely like this. And then when you hear about the kids who had the outbreak of disease that was created inside the facilities. So it's because it's so unsanitary. That's why the flu began, and that's why some of them have died. And you see the video and you connect the two, you go, oh, now I get exactly how that could happen, and how everyone in the building knows how bad it is, but none of them are doing anything about it.
Right.
And as always, the fish rots from the head down. And that's Donald Trump, who probably looks at that video and might celebrate, because he wanted to be vicious to them. So I guess mission accomplished.
Exactly, and I actually want to clarify something or correct something that I said yesterday, because I had mentioned how, look, Trump is pushing for this friendly relationship with Kim Jong-un because he hasn't really delivered much to his base. I mean, the only thing he's really accomplished is tax cuts for the wealthy. Most of his base doesn't consist of wealthy people, right? And then someone called me out and said, no, his viciousness toward these migrants is something he's delivering to his base. And that person was absolutely right. So if you're watching this right now, thank you for pointing that out. This is something that appeals to, unfortunately, a significant portion of the country. And this is the reason why it's important for us to take a step back and take a good look at ourselves. Because while we talk about how great we are and how we should, do these interventionist wars to spread democracy, in reality, we don't care about the lives of other people. We barely even care about the lives of people living in our own country.
So look, this is the only place in media you'll hear this. So Republicans support Donald Trump to the tune of 90% of the Republican voters. So when they see that video, they see something that they like. So it's not like these conditions are new. They've heard about them 1,000 times. And they've never abandoned Trump over it. It's not the bug, it's the feature. So I know the rest of the media is scared to call it what it is, but the Republican voters are the monsters. We live on different planets, and people like Joe Biden keep asking me to get along with them. I'm sorry, I'm not going to. I'm gonna fight them,
yes.
And we're gonna win. Because more people are decent and look at that video and are horrified than are people that are indecent. But the indecent is a significant minority of this country. Somewhere between 25 to 40% of this country are the bad guys. And no other media will tell you that. They're so scared of Republicans. But if you look at that video and you think, got him, right? You're a bad person. You're the bad guy in the movie. You're the one we have to overcome so that the force of goodness can actually win. So Jesus didn't come in and go, the poor, the needy, let's lock them up. Let's make them sleep on the concrete floors. No, he said you help the poor and the needy. So if you think you're being a good Christian by being mean to those people, by being vicious to those people, you're 100% wrong. You're the worst kind of Christian, the worst kind of American, and the worst kind of person. Am I clear enough?
We got to take a break, but when we come back, let's save some of that rage for Brian Kilmeade, who has compared these detention camps to house parties. We'll be right back.
We hope you're enjoying the Joining me now is John Ziegler, who is an interesting cat. He is very conservative. He is very much against Donald Trump. He has written for the Daily Caller, Breitbart, but also Huffington Post and Mediaite. And now we're going to have a fascinating conversation about Joe Biden and whether he's the right candidate for Democrats. By the way, I should also mention freespeechbroadcasting.com is where you can find John as well as a host. All right, John, welcome back, brother. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. This should be interesting.
Indeed. All right, my case against Joe Biden is Joe Biden. So just look at what he's done over the last week. It's been an epic disaster. So I'll let you start first. Well, what's your case for Joe Biden as a more electable candidate?
Well, first of all, I don't even like Joe Biden. I think he's a gaffe machine. I disagree with him on almost all major issues. But I think you and I share, I hope we do, a primary goal in this 2020 election, which is that the cancer that is Donald Trump be removed from the presidency of the United States. And the best metaphor I can come up with is we have a cancer, and what it appears as if at least the progressive wing of the Democratic Party wants to do
All of the Spider-Man films tend to feature the same elements over and over again. While a lot of it's worked well for the character for about 60 years, you could go to the theater and play Spidey Bingo pretty easily. Here are things that we see in every single Spider-Man movie. Let's start with a gimme here. If you have a nephew or niece and you find out they've been bitten by a radioactive spider and developed fantastic abilities like sticking to walls or super strength, pack your bags and get out of town as fast as you can. Otherwise, you're headed for disaster. Admittedly, the death of his uncle is the most important part of Spider-Man's origin story, but still, watching an old man get shot starts to lose its impact when you've seen it over and over, which is especially problematic in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. We get Uncle Ben's murder happening in the first film, a flashback and tons of references to it in Spider-Man 2, and a completely different version of it that involves the sad sack movie version of the Sandman making up a huge chunk of the plot of Spider-Man 3.
Remember Ben Parker? The old man you shot down in cold blood?
It should probably be noted that this particular brand of tragedy isn't limited to Ben. In Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Miles Morales watches as his own uncle is killed in front of him. As for the MCU, those movies have managed to avoid even a mention of the late Ben Parker so far, with only a couple of oblique references to Peter's defining tragedy. Far From Home, however, is going to take place in the aftermath of Tony Stark's death. He's not Peter's uncle by relation, but he's definitely served as a father figure. And if there was ever someone in Peter's life who fit the weird uncle archetype, it's that guy.
Hey, May. How you doing? What are you wearing? Something skimpy, I hope.
One of the most interesting choices in Spider-Man's design is that he's one of the few American superheroes whose costume leaves him completely covered from head to toe. His mask doesn't even have a mouth, just a pair of big opaque eyes. This works pretty well in comics, but in movies where actors use their faces to, act, it presents a bit of a problem. That's probably why the Spider-Man we see in the movie theater seems like he'll do whatever he can to get out of that mask, regardless of how it impacts his secret identity. Again, the Raimi trilogy is the biggest offender in this regard. Not only does Peter's mask get shredded by villains with a frequency that makes you wonder just how many spares he has laying around, he'll occasionally just whip the whole thing off. Sure, it's a lot easier to tell a character's struggling when you can see their face, but eventually, people are going to wonder why that kid who's always taking pictures of Spider-Man never seems to catch him without his mask on.
We won't tell nobody.
Along the same lines, Homecoming features a recreation of the famous comic book scene where Spidey fights his way out from underneath tons of rubble. In the comic, the mask stays on, but on the big screen, Tom Holland's Spidey takes his mask off to get some fresh air and keeps it off so that we can see him powering through his superheroic feat of strength. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker shows off his face in Amazing Spider-Man to help calm down a boy who's in danger. It even extends to animated acting in Into the Spider-Verse, where Spidey loses his mask just before he's killed by the Kingpin. And Peter B spends most of the movie unmasked and in sweatpants. There are very few things that superhero movies love as much as a good old-fashioned dose of crucifixion imagery. You might recall the scene in Man of Steel, for instance, where our hero's ghostly space father tells the son he sent to Earth that he can save everyone, prompting Superman to stick his arms out and start hovering in a pose that's pretty familiar to anyone who's ever been inside a church. While that's the least subtle example of this trope, Spider-Man's movies have even more of it in action. That's probably to be expected in a story of great power and great responsibility, but once you start noticing it, you'll find it happens a lot. Spidey stopping the train in Spider-Man 2 is the most obvious instance, but when Peter tries to hold the ferry together in Homecoming, we get the same thing in a pretty similar shot. Spider-Man 3 even has an entire sequence that takes place in a church, finally adding parasitic alien symbiotes to classic biblical imagery. Into the Spider-Verse actually manages to parody the movie's crucifixation twice in the first 2 minutes, including a shot showing a Spidey bathed in rays of sunlight that give him just a tiny bit of a halo. One of the most compelling parts of Spider-Man's story is the impact that his superheroic career has on his soap opera of a love life. It's the source of endless drama, and it usually gets pretty complicated. The same goes for the movies. Every single Spider-Man film has a love story right there at the core of its plot, with all the twists and turns that you'd expect. In the Raimi films, it was Peter's on-again, off-again relationship with Mary Jane Watson, which started out complicated and only gets more tangled as the films continue, especially when Gwen Stacy shows up in Spider-Man 3. In Amazing Spider-Man, Gwen was free of a love triangle, but that relationship had no shortage of speed bumps. In the first film, Gwen's dad wanted to arrest Spider-Man for his vigilante activity.
I think he stands for what you stand for, sir. Protecting innocent people from bad guys.
I stand for law and order, son. That's what I stand for, okay? I wear a badge. This guy wears a mask.
And in the second, a series of spats wound up leading to Gwen's tragic death. Homecoming threw a different kind of wrench into the gears with Peter's crush on classmate Liz. Not only did he have to deal with constantly letting his friends down due to his arachnid activities, he also had to contend with the reveal that her dad was a supervillain, who figured out Peter was Spider-Man literally 10 minutes after meeting him.
Good old Spider-Man.
Into the Spider-Verse complicates matters further thanks to its dimension-hopping plot. We've got a Peter Parker who's dealing with a divorce from Mary Jane, with whom he's clearly still in love, and a different Mary Jane who's dealing with the death of her world's Peter Parker. And those are just the minor characters. The main romantic tension in that movie is between two people from different realities. That's a tough one. There's long-distance relationships, and then there's my girlfriend? You don't know her. She lives on Earth 65. Spider-Man's roster of enemies is packed with characters who are actually pretty sympathetic. Unlike, say, murderous clowns that only want to watch the world burn, supervillains like the Lizard and the Sandman have motivations that we can relate to, and come with a heaping helping of pathos that the movies are more than willing to bring to the screen. The Green Goblin in Spider-Man is the outlier here, since it's pretty hard to be sympathetic when you're pumpkin bombing an old lady's bedroom while she's saying her bedtime prayers.
Deliver us! Finish it! Finish it! Evil!
Then again, even he has a scene where Norman Osborn is being tormented by his own alternate personality. Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 is shown to be a pretty decent guy before he's driven to multi-armed criminal insanity. And in Amazing Spider-Man, Kurt Connors the Lizard just wants to regrow his lost arm. The Vulture in Homecoming is maybe the least sympathetic guy of the bunch.
I'll kill you and everybody you love.
For all his talk about sticking up for the little guy, Adrian Toomes drives a Jaguar and owns a massive house in New York City, bought and paid for with the profits from his high-tech arms dealing business. But still, his stated motivation of wanting to take care of his family is hard to argue with. And if nothing else, he keeps Peter's identity a secret rather than seeking revenge. Into the Spider-Verse goes the furthest with this. Not only do we see the Prowler as a regular guy hanging out with his favorite nephew, but even the Kingpin has a shred of sympathy in there. Yes, he kills Spider-Man with his bare hands and had a plan that might have destroyed all of reality, but it all comes from his desire to see his wife and son again. Their methods are bad, but their desires are very human, and pretty far from world domination. In his first appearance, Spider-Man didn't start out with his familiar spider suit. Instead, his first outing after getting his powers was in a pretty terrible homemade ensemble, and that's an idea that the movies have kept around. There's always a bad costume first. In Spider-Man, it was a recreation of a scene from the original comic where he fought a pro wrestler while wearing a sweatsuit and ski mask tricked out with a stenciled spider on the chest. In Amazing Spider-Man, it was a red mask with dark wraparound shades. The MCU actually flipped the script a little by starting Peter off, at least as far as the audience is concerned, in a comics-accurate version of his famous red and blue suit, provided by Tony Stark. It's only at the end of Homecoming that he goes back to his homemade hoodie. Into the Spider-Verse, however, takes the cake on this particular trope, with bad costumes all over the place. Not only does Peter spend most of the movie rocking sweatpants and mismatched shoes, but Miles Morales doesn't get his costume until the very end. Before that, most of his spidery adventures take place while he's wearing a cheap Spider-Man Halloween costume, purchased, of course, from smiling Stan Lee. No refunds. Incidentally, these are all just bad costumes. If you're looking for the evil costumes, well, that's a different guy.
Outstanding. Now, let's bite all the heads off and pile them up in the corner.
Spider-Man's life is pretty much defined by tragedy. It's the core of his character, the hard luck hero aspect that makes him so easy to relate to. But if the movies go back to that well all the time, it gets both boring and a little too depressing. As much as we like watching him get knocked down, it's always better to see him get back up again. That's why the movies always show us something to remind us that being Spider-Man is actually kind of awesome, and more than a little fun.
But after everything, I still love being Spider-Man. I mean, who wouldn't?
Spider-Verse gives us all kinds of moments like this, from Spider-Man cutting an album of Christmas carols to the extended comedy of Miles accidentally getting his hand stuck to Gwen Stacy's hair. Throw in some Karate Kid-style web-swinging lessons, and it does a great job of showing us that having superpowers is actually pretty cool. The Raimi movies do it too, leaning into zany comedy with Peter zipping around the city on his web lines to deliver pizza. He even looks like he's having fun with that dance number, even if no one else is. Amazing Spider-Man 2 takes that to the next level, with Spidey getting to his graduation through a series of wild rides and slapstick crime-fighting hijinks. It's Homecoming that does this best, though, with a montage of Peter's after-school activities as the friendly neighborhood superhero. Not only is he excited to get out there and start doing good, he gets a churro from a nice lady that he eats while hanging out on a fire escape, and even does a backflip when he's asked to by members of the public. That's what sets Spider-Man apart from the other superheroes. He's the guy who will stop and argue with you about who makes the best sandwich.
Yeah, the best sandwich in Queens.
Subhaven's pretty good.
It's too much bread.
I like bread.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite superheroes are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.
It's been over a month already, but there's so much we're still processing from Avengers Endgame. To be honest, a lot of what we're still thinking about comes from the film's gigantic battle scene. With so many characters and storylines in play, it was very easy to miss some of the more subtle elements. Join us as we dive into some things you may have missed. Oh, and please let us know if you spot Ant-Man's taco in any of the battle footage. We think it could be important. Starting us off is what appears to be a planned cameo in Endgame's final battle. Shortly after the film's release, Robert Downey Jr. released a picture of the cast and crew. Glimpsed in that photo is Sean Gunn, the actor who plays Kraglin. Not only that, but Gunn's costume appears to include a cybernetic implant similar to that of Kraglin's old boss Yondu. Still, despite the photo, it seems that Kraglin did not appear in Endgame, unless he was deep in the background of the battle. The Ravager certainly made an appearance, and it's possible Kraglin was among them, but he was never plainly visible. If Gunn filmed a bigger role, which is certainly possible, it seems that it ended up on the cutting room floor. A great show-stopping moment in the final battle was the appearance of Pepper Potts. Despite being heavily involved in the MCU from the very beginning, Pepper never really got her proper action hero due. It was highly gratifying to see her get in on the alien shooting fun in Endgame's climax, which found her doing